Welcome to the Digital Services Forum bi-weekly call. Today we're going to do a continuation of what we did a few weeks ago, which is basically to go and continue our CSDM workshop. So we've been walking through that a little bit, ran into a little bit of tension last time. So hopefully we're going to talk about that a little bit and clear it up today, because a lot of that is to be expected on the call. So if today's your first time on the call, we like to keep a really active chat. So if you can go ahead and just type your name in the chat and where you're from. And then if this is your first time, tell us how you heard about us. And we'd appreciate that. And then do feel free to use the chat back and forth. A lot of people make connections here. And that's a big part of what this is too, is to do networking with people who are doing similar things to what you're doing. So please keep that chat active. We're going to go through and review part one. I'm going to do a quick review on part one. And then we're going to jump into how ServiceNow uses Workday. The contention we had last time was that a lot of people see Workday differently and they see their services differently. So we're going to talk today with the team directly so that we can understand more directly how Workday works in ServiceNow. So we'll use that as our use case instead of just doing a general approach on how we might model work. So we'll have a discussion with that team and continue building out the model. If we get through today, if we get through everything, we won't have a part three. If we need a part three, we'll do a part three sometime in a later meeting. So we'll continue to build out that last model and see how far we get and then go from there. All right, so what we are doing is we're working through a workshop that we deliver through the Enterprise Architecture Group. So we're mocking up one of those workshops so that everybody can understand it. A lot of times what we do is we try to walk through one of these so you could do the next one yourselves. What we typically do there is we talk about the common service data model. So we introduce it to people that haven't seen it before. And then we'll go through and design one of theirs, because seeing a bunch of blocks and lines on a paper is intimidating. But if you put things you understand in those boxes, then it makes it a lot less intimidating. So that's what we're doing, is we're working through that design. And then we imported some of our model last week. So this way we could see where the use cases are. Because a lot of people start high-fiving when they finish a model, and it's not a useful model until you get it into a process. Incident, problem, change are the typical ones, but then other processes like business continuity and security. So that's what we're trying to do, is get you into that, get it into the database so that process owners can use it. And then we're looking at some of the visualization on it. All right, so last week we went through a definition. I'm not going to spend time on this again, but this definition slide is in here for today's presentation, so you can talk through it. But basically what we're doing the same thing, from designing a service to delivering it to a business consumer. We went through a little bit about the boxes and lines in here and all the tables that we fill up for the different domains, a business service offering all the way up to the business capability. And then the different people that own that data, right? Which is a big part of it too. You don't want somebody that's doing your infrastructure design to be building your business application model, right? They're different people that build different things. And then those different people have ways of inputting the data differently. So we're looking at all the builders for all the domains as we go through this exercise. Okay, this green part is a part that you have to build yourself. Right, so this is in the CMDB. These are all CI classes, but this part that's in the green is these are tables you have to define. The stuff in the orange is where you're doing a lot of your discovery. The overlap between those two is the application service. So the part we're focusing on with the common service data model is the green part. We're focusing on all of the services and the business applications, more of the architecture parts and the delivery parts. We talked about, a lot of people say, I don't have services defined or I don't have apps defined. Well, likely you do 21 times. So we just brought this up to show the tool chains that these services and products and applications are leveraged across. So a lot of times the planning tools that are involved in the planning process, they'll all have definitions of apps, services, and products. The building tools, when you get into your CI/CD pipelines, they all have different definitions. And then if you get into your run tools that we use, like in ServiceNow, when a lot of people do ITSM, that is all your run tools, that the run tools around delivering the products and services. So we're doing here, when we say common, we're trying to say, don't define this 21 times, let's define it once. And then everybody use that same definition to do their work. Okay, we went through some other process things last time, just to go through and explain like that we're using the models everywhere. So if you're doing an idea, we're using the model. If you're doing an incident, we're using the model. If you're committing a source change, we're using the model. So the idea here is to use that model across all your plan, build, run activities. And so before we go to the next section, I want to introduce our team, and I'll let Albert come off mute. I think everybody's on. I think we have your whole team today, Albert?
I believe so.
All right. So you want to introduce them and then Rob can go and Srini?
Sure. Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Albert Lee. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm a principal technical product manager for our HRIS team, so to speak. And I've been at ServiceNow for going over 3 years, based out here in the Bay Area. And I've been in the Workday ecosystem for well over a decade. So happy to talk with you. Thanks. Rob, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Rob Preston. A similar background to Albert. I'm a principal HRS business analyst, and I've been using the Workday ecosystem for close to 12 years, multiple global implementations for multiple companies, and specializing in core and advanced compensation.
Hi, folks. My name is Srinivas Shekhar. I go by Srini, and I'm the HRIS architect supporting Workday, and I work closely with Albert Lee and Rob Preston.
All right. Thank you and welcome, guys. I appreciate you jumping on and helping us work through these models so that everybody can understand the conversation that some designer would have with a team like yours. So last week, I went through this with you guys a little bit, but last week what we did is we started to just plug Workday in. And it was a really hard conversation because everybody uses Workday a little bit differently. So today I want to go through and ask you guys a few questions because we have Srini up here on the architecture domain, Albert down here, right? I think you would see yourself down here more, Albert, right, as running the operations or the tech services domain.
Yes.
And then Rob is more over here, like as a BRM, right? Where he collects a lot of the requirements for you. Is that?
I do.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Albert.
Go ahead. Okay, I was just gonna say, yeah, Rob helps with the requirements and then also developing and configuring Workday to be able to meet the requirements that our business would like us to deliver.
Perfect. Perfect. All right. So I'm going to get out of here so we can change some of this around a little bit before we'll jump into the product a little bit at the end and show how we bring in some of this. But I think we talked up here. So you have the business capability you guys weren't sure of, right? Like, do you know if they call this in your enterprise architecture? Do they call it HR management? Or Srini, do you get involved in that at all into the business capability side of it?
I mean, not sure what do you mean by the business capability there? I mean, is it the modules we support?
Yeah, this is probably something that your EA team does because I spoke to them before. So it's probably, this is more at the enterprise level. And then you come in and you're the Workday architect, right?
Right. Yeah.
So you work on the Workday application or you work on a specific module in Workday?
The Workday applications. So I think, and I work closely with Satya, who's our EA architect lead there.
Okay. And then in Workday, you guys own the HCM modules and you own what's it, advanced compensate. What was the other ones?
Yeah, I can go through that. So for how we use Workday, so we have a number of different modules. For us, it's HCM,
Okay.
advanced comp, benefits, but we're not truly using it for like the entire benefits module, such as open enrollment. We don't do that here. Time and absence and advanced comp. I said
Okay.
so.
Okay, let's put this.
Is it?
benefits.
Are we allowed to ask questions?
Sure.
So the human capital management, so I just had to do this in my organization, map this out so that we could support incident problem change as well as the pipeline, digital service pipeline. Anyways, so the human capital management prod application has some underlying components to it. Would you break those out into application services as well? So like the recruit, I'm not sure if recruiting specifically is a piece. I'm just trying to pull it up here.
We'll get down to that in a minute. Joe,
Okay.
can you hold the question until we get down into the orange?
Yeah, I can.
So, excuse me, this is Randy. I'm just going to comment on the definition of a business capability, right? Because if, just like what I've heard now, not many of us really have a good understanding of what that means. So from a human resource perspective, would it be appropriate for us to say the business capability is human capital management, and the sub capabilities would be advanced compensation?
It might be.
And so on.
Yeah, it might be depending on your business architecture. So what you're usually doing here is you're expressing an organizational need in business terms before you start mapping technology to it. So this would be like usually a business architect. Business capability models are 101 of business architecture. So that they even start with that usually before they start buying things. So there might be 20 things underneath here besides Workday. But we just put that, and then usually you're designing here, right? You're saying, I need this capability. I need to deploy human capital management. And then you're giving that back to the organization. Once you get all the tech you use, you need to do it, right? So up here is more of a design phase in the business level, expressing.
And John, I would usually expect business capabilities to be broken down a bit more hierarchical than that. HR management might be the top level, but then below that would be compensation or training, benefit, there'd be different sub capabilities that are, manage benefits, manage compensation, those kinds of things. Because different business applications are going to map to different of those sub capabilities. You don't want to go all to one, just super high level one.
Yeah, they go all the way down to like, if you pull a reference model, like there's an organization called the Business Architecture Guild that we add on here that represents, they have reference models for all the different industries. And the government reference model, and they have about 2,200 capabilities. So they go all the way down to a level 4. So this would be more like a level 1 capability. And then you can go down nesting as deep as you want, depending on how involved you are with that business model that you're creating.
And it's really the outcome is what the business does, not how it's done. Either and capabilities are supported by applications, technology, organizations, people, and then processes as well. They all work together to deliver that capability.
Yeah. And that's a lot of times, if you don't have business architects in here that are contributing to the model, don't try to fill those tables out. Right. So
where do you separate the business capabilities and the services? Because we struggled with that.
Separate them or attach them?
Separate them. So when you're breaking down a capability 4 levels, to me at that point in time, it's something that your business is doing to support a capability.
A service delivers a capability or one or more capabilities, most likely.
That's the loop back here, right? That this is the service that's being delivered because you designed in that capability. Right. So this is kind of the loop back to the delivery of what you intended to build out here. So I'm not going to go down and build out a whole hierarchy here of a business capability, but I just wanted to put this up, usually expressed in the form of a noun versus a verb, because you're describing a thing like HR, human capital management, right? Or HR management. And then you're delivering it down here. So this is where you're actually managing HR. So this is the verb for this noun that's up here.
And what role or persona instantiated that managed HR business service?
The enterprise architect.
And when in this process would you see that happening?
So ideally it's in the beginning. Your design is happening first, and then you're going counterclockwise here. So you're designing and you're saying, because here too, they're saying, I need to kill stuff, right? I need to get rid of stuff that's under HR management that's 25 years old and bring in new stuff. So it's the constant cycle of evaluating what is providing that capability to us today and where do we need to modernize. So that's the exercise an enterprise architect should be doing in this domain.
And is there any kind of process for certification or life cycle of those business services?
Yeah. There's Mark and Scott talked about that a few weeks ago. The life cycles of these business services and everything in here, they're all CIs. So in Xanadu, we just put out a new CI life cycle that's available in that recording.
Yeah, but like the life cycle's got tabs, right? I guess my question is more about how do I engage that HR management, the enterprise architect, right, for HR management to make sure that they're keeping those models, the services up to date and accurate and mapped.
There's a lot of processes and procedures and tools that we have. We have an enterprise architecture suite. If you're using ServiceNow for an enterprise architecture repo, and they have an application rationalization process. We have a guide around that. So there's a lot that needs to be done up here in that domain that's separate from just delivering the service, which we're talking about today.
Okay.
App rationalization is a huge one. Yeah. So it's a lot about the money people are up here, right? The lines of business owners are up here designing and figuring out what we need to get rid of. So that should be a constant exercise that a lot of organizations don't do too well, right? These are the people that should be solving the technical debt problems.
Yeah, that's kind of why my questions are being driven.
Yep. So a mature practice there basically is they're one of their top three is usually technical debt removal, right?
And suggestions for remediating and maturing that process. You're saying, was it Bodman that had a video? Who were you saying?
Yeah, but we did a couple. The Business Architecture Guild we did last year, and we had Bill in who has a whole model for this, right? For the business capability model. And we have a way to import those into ServiceNow. And it's kind of like Business Architecture 101. There's a thing called the BizBot, which is a guide for building out your whole business architecture. And that's one of the ones that we recommend.
Thank you.
Hey, John.
Good chat on that domain. Hey, Etta.
I'm gonna wait, can I put my hand down? We'll do that later.
Okay.
This whole piece in the design domain around business capabilities and the business applications, and if it's platform host and if it's platform application, I think using Workday and then ServiceNow, we need a session on that because I've done the deep dive into this. I finally got it working. I did. I just have a few questions, but I've been involved with the Business Architecture Guild now since 2019 because I knew this was coming, right? So now that we're here and trying to make it work, it's like, okay, theory is amazing, but down here on earth where the people have to implement this for customers, how do I get it into ServiceNow? So I finally got it sorted out, but we can keep, because we're building this out in our instance anyway.
Yeah,
so,
and I'll show you like the physical import of that. I'm going to just, we did a capability last week.
Very good.
But I'll actually show that on the subsequent screens down here. We're trying to get to the model here so that we can bring it into the database here. Whether we get to this today or not is TBD, right? Because if we just get through this conversation today, I think it'll be great.
So it would. And I would recommend people only bring your business capabilities down to level 3. I know you can go to 6, but at level 3, you have enough information to then transition to your business process. So let your business process do your details.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to be quiet.
Let's move out of that domain just so we can cover each one a little bit, but great conversation. Thanks for that. So when you come over here, getting back to your team, Albert or Srini, I don't know, do we have a Workday team that configures Workday, or do we have a a benefits enrollment team, advanced comp team, and HCM team? Are they separate, or are they all one big team?
So to answer your question, yes, we do have, yes and yes. We do have a Workday team, so to speak. And then we also do separate it out between HCM and some of our other modules, such as Total Rewards, that are owned by different areas. So
So is
yes.
it broken out by product, or is it broken out by, like, in the epics? Do you know if they call out the stories for business benefits enrollment separately? Like, is it all one big work queue where they say, hey, I might pull a benefits enrollment piece, or is there a specific team that says, oh, that's a benefits enrollment requirement? I'm gonna.
Yeah, so we are separated. So HCM and quote unquote total rewards. Total rewards encompasses comp, benefits, and global mobility. And then we also have time and absence and time tracking as another business application. And so we have different epics that tie into the modules. And so we run Agile using the Agile methodology. And then depending on the request, they'll go to each respective backlog. And then that's where the stories will roll into the epics and etc.
Okay. And here's another one where if you're not doing your stories and epics for Workday in ServiceNow, you don't need to do this domain. But if you are, right, like Albert is, you need to go ahead and figure this domain out, because what it's going to do is when you define this HCM application, and we showed this in last week's video, but if you're going to define, once I put HCM in the database, right, once I put this in the table, it's going to automatically create a corresponding product, right? So the product for this gets automatically created here once we define that business application. So whether you want it or not, that product is there. Whether you use the queue or not, that's okay, because you might have a Workday. Like, some people might have one big Workday team, and the only thing that they're hanging stories off of is that Workday queue. Other people's might specialize, like Albert just told me the breakdown, right? So here you might want to represent it so that you're thinking of ownership here. Like, there's some dev manager that owns the HCM team or the total rewards team. So what you're doing here is building the structure for those people that are doing that work. Up here, you're building the structure for the people that own those applications, or the people who are architecting those capabilities, right? So think of a person, like, it'd be great if I could just take pictures and put people's pictures on here, because that's really what you're doing, is you're designing, it's an organizational design of how the work flows. Like, we bought HCM. I gave it to some team. I gave it to Fred, so Fred can take his team and make it do what we need it to do to deliver this. So that's what we're trying to do here, is map that flow of the work that gets done when it gets assigned out.
John, I think there's a question in the chat. I have the same one. It's about David asked who, I guess this is for you, Albert. In the design, you have the Workday and you have HCM, advanced comp and benefits. My assumption is that's a reference. So are you treating Workday as the platform and those are your platform applications? Because I don't know, is that how it is?
Exactly.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Workday itself doesn't do anything until you buy something. Kind of like ServiceNow, right? ServiceNow as a platform doesn't really deliver any value, but then once you put ITSM on it or CSM, so that's exactly what it is, Lou, is that representation.
So you're using the out of the box platform and platform application within APM on the form to make those relationships.
Exactly.
All right, perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And my question about that I put in the chat was more about down there on where the technology consumer is. What relation type is that between Workday prod and HCM prod? And how does that relationship get created?
Yeah, let's jump down there. So that's enough said about the stories. Usually what they're doing now is they're taking the products up here and they're pushing it, like HCM version 1 configuration. I'm pushing that down to HCM prod or to Workday prod. So this is what we did last week, but I think this might be wrong. So I think, Albert, what you guys have is you have a Workday team, right? In ServiceNow, you have a Workday prod. did all of the things flow to?
Yep. And we have a number of also dev and test environments that we work with, Sandbox as well. And that's where our dev testing happens before we deploy it to our Workday production environment.
And what do you call them? Do you call it Workday production, or do you call it something else? Or
We just call it production.
okay.
Hey, yeah, Rob, Srini, I don't know if you guys refer to it as anything different, but yeah, it's just prod is prod.
Okay. So this team over here, you're like the tier 1 help desk comes in and says, I'm having a problem with changing a benefit. And they say, yeah, something's broken, man. I need to get it over to Albert's team, right? So they would call it, they would recognize Workday prod as that right place to pass it to, the workplace prod team.
Yes, if they're unable to resolve it themselves, then it does get escalated to us, as an incident. And then our team will go ahead and take a look to see what the root cause of the issue is. Is it, it could be a number of different aspects. And so from there, then we triage and then look for a resolution from there. Or an
Okay.
enhancement.
And
to our
do you
platform.
do any differentiation between like HCM and AvCom for benefits enrollment in the application service?
Yeah, so let's see. In terms of the ticket can you expand on your question, please?
Yeah, so like when I look at your design section up there, you've got Workday as the business application, and then you have 3 business applications that are running on that platform, right?
Yeah.
And so if HCM business app, the production instance of that was broken, right? Where's the application service? Is that the Workday prod application service, or is there an HCM application service that all that gear runs into? And how's that relationship between Workday prod and the HCM prod managed down there in the technology consumer, the managed technical services area?
Okay, I think I understand.
Is there different people, and are they all on your team? I guess is the main question there. Like, do you have an HCM girl and then a benefits enrollment guy type thing?
Yes, so it is different teams. And then we all roll up to the same umbrella for Workday. So there's only one Workday instance, production environment. And so yeah.
Okay.
How do you
John,
manage
there was-
detailed? Go ahead.
I was going to say, so based on what he said, so then there would only be one application service, correct? Not an application service for each of the children of platform host, platform application. So platform host would have the application service and not the platform applications. Correct?
Those would have, yeah.
It doesn't have to be that way, though. I mean, you imagine you see
No,
Workday.
But I
there
want
in
it to be that
design.
way because otherwise it's too confusing. Sorry.
Right, it is. I can guarantee you.
Yeah, you have to
I
think.
have it for every one of those HCM, advanced comp, and benefits. They all have different app services, different offerings. Yes, you're absolutely right. You can simplify and point it all to the same app service if that makes sense. But you got to imagine each one of those is its own CSDM model. If you were to take each one of those out and put it against its own model with its own app service offerings, yeah.
Well, and not only that, but you can support, you can have a change against the HCM module versus an update to some other application service that you have, such as recruiting or something like that, which is, I guess it's a different product.
I was about to make the same point. If you want to
Exactly.
granularly assign instance problems changes to the sub applications, you need a separate app service because that's the operational entity that you can relate to those tickets. You can't relate a business app, or you can say it's all of Workday prod, but then you don't get that granularity to know, well, what part of that are you actually changing?
Yeah.
And
This is
my
part of-
concern is we're not showing the platform dependency down there on a
Correct.
managed technical service, right? Because
Ding, ding.
if the platform, if Workday's down, so in my world, Workday would probably have hardware related to it. And HCM and AdComp and benefits enrollment may not have any physical hardware. It may be all packages running on that Workday hardware someplace, right?
So let's talk about that for a minute, because let's say that this, and we're just going to use onboarding until we get to that domain and correct it, right? But let's say this team, and this is usually going to be your level 1 support. So this team today can only go to Workday Prod. But what Albert's telling me is there's an advanced comp team back here, and there's also a HCM team, or is a benefits enrollment team that's different, right? Is there like different managers there?
Yeah, so we have an HCM team as well, and then also time tracking and leave of absence as well.
Okay. So when you're documenting this, you don't want to design the way it should be. You want to design the way it is, right? So our current state now is that Albert's saying anybody who calls in here calls to the Workday team, and then they decide where it goes, right? So they're escalating it to one of these other teams.
Yes.
So the first thing we're going to say is we're going to want to fix it, right? And we're going to say, why are you doing that? Why can't we just teach these people to go right to advanced comp and do some level of diagnostics?
No.
And that's part of the reason for this design, right? Is to look for these inefficiencies. Like the other day I was with a company out on the East Coast, and they had this thing here, and then they had Citrix behind it. And I'm like, why are you making that team escalate to Citrix? Why can't you just put Citrix up here and let these guys decide whether it's Citrix or the core, right?
So what you're saying is that those service offerings are all managed by Workday, but what if the service offerings managed by benefits enrollment? I have a benefits enrollment service offering, right? And it only comes through that platform, even though it runs on the Workday platform. How would I map that benefits capability, and how would that capability map down here at that technical services level?
Yeah. So what you're saying today, Albert, is they have to come through Workday, right? And then you decide, like there's a main queue for Workday, and then they decide where the work goes.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it does get triaged in terms of if we do have cases that come from our tier 1 team, decide where it should route to, because that's where our SMEs are, that can help troubleshoot and diagnose if there's an issue or enhancement that's coming.
Yeah. So what you just said is fine, right? If you can do that, if you can say, but you have to change your process, right? Because the front end people here they only know to pass it to the Workday team. They don't know.
And that's because that mapping happens between the managed onboarding service offering and the Workday prod.
You got it.
And you can structure that relationship to whatever needs to be structured to based on who the first responder is for that managing onboard service offering.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's what you're looking for here, those inefficiencies, right? Like what can I get level 1 to skip to get more direct to these people? Like I probably can't have these people diagnose, oh yeah, that's a Linux server. Like your level 1 people aren't going to be able to go all the way down here. But if they can get it to the right queue and skip a queue, right, we're chopping out one of the bottlenecks, right? We're removing the friction in the diagnostic part of that service.
But my real problem is I have 300 critical business applications, and every one of those all have service owners, and this service offering stuff is fairly new to them. And how do I get them to build and design their application services so that they support this model and that it can be current and accurate, right? Because it winds up being a spaghetti mess, and it's more than just like one small team of architects can support.
Yeah, and my theory is that this is the conversation that we have to have here if we want to optimize the flow of work, whether it's design work or whether it's development work or whether it's support work like we're talking about here, that we have to understand that work, right, in order to optimize it. So conversations like we're having on the call today with the right people, right? Like I tried to do this without Albert here, and it was a nightmare because you can't get anywhere here. Like people say, hey, show me an Epic design. Well, I can't show you an Epic design because it's going to be different for every org, right? How we structure the support around Epic. And so this conversation has to happen somewhere, and somebody should be looking at, why do I have 1,000 retreads here? Why is this work, whether it's a change coming up or an incident coming in? Why is it all being done so poorly, right? Why does it take so long to fix it? So this is,
Yeah.
that's where it makes sense doing all this work, right? Or even your business continuity plans. Like, how can I say, like, if somebody hits this data center, benefits enrollment's going to get, like, there's all that work being done without a good perspective on it. Because now what people have to do is go all these places and try to figure out, how do we do this here? How do we do it there? How do we do it? You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
you're trying to
John,
put it in.
I have actually, I've been working with this for several years, and I think what we're missing here is really the junction between the technology and business.
Yes.
And I believe, like, when we start talking about application service, it really has to come from two streams, right? Technology and the business. When we're talking about the Workday here as a platform, I believe the platform as a technology supports the technical capabilities. But then you also have a business side where you define your capability, and those capabilities going to be based on the personas, right? Or based on how do you use that technology. And I feel that we are missing here as well some linkage between how do we represent the technology as a platform. Like, we have the application service running on a server, which is like legacy world right now. At the same time, we have, like, taking ServiceNow. It's a platform as a service. This is really an infrastructure we have. And I think when we start thinking about capability, and I know that this was hunting multiple organizations when I worked with this, and it still is, because they were trying to map that application service either to technical capability or to business capability. And I think that's a mistake we are making. So, like, when we're talking about Workday here, in fact, it should be mapped to both of those. Because from one side, you have your technology supporting HR, right? And it's on the other side, you also have your business capabilities, and maybe it's a service portfolio. That's kind of like really gray area right now. And I think that's what's hunting us here when we try to map it.
Now, the things up here, the things to remember about the blue domain is nothing up here is an operational CI. So you should never be hanging user stories or hanging incidents or changes or problems. This is all for design. So I need this capability, so I'm buying this stuff. So this is all more compliance position and business design.
Right, and that's what I'm getting to. But here we need to actually split it up by two separate towers. You would have your business capability, and those ones going to be decided by your business divisions, right? They will decide how do they want to serve their customers, either it's internal or external. At the same time, you have a technology coming here, and the technology going to be different. That's where your platform going to be mapped to at some point. And I think the platform really going to be like, sitting not like on the application service side, but more like on the infrastructure side there.
And that's the CSDM has a relationship here from the license you're buying, or this could be building too, right? This is like the COTS example. And then you'll see that it's connected through a relationship to these application services, which by definition are representations of an application technology stack, right? So these could be a cloud, right? They don't have any infrastructure, or it could be a bunch of infrastructure underneath each of these. But this contract that you're buying, this compliance position, is what enables you to run these three instances of Workday in ServiceNow.
So,
well, John, I think specifically what you just said, for instead of COTS, it's the new SaaS option.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah.
So has the relationship between the business application directly to the application service been discontinued? Is that no longer a relationship in the rel table, and that it goes through the digital product, or it goes through the
No,
service?
that's still there. That's still a direct.
I don't see it mapped on this diagram. That's been one of my questions about the CSDM Model 4 is why do we not show that anymore?
Yeah, it's still here. So if you look, the business app here, I get what you're saying. It's going through the SDLC component. Yeah. But there is a direct relationship if you look at the documentation and you look at the recommended relationships between CIs, there's still a recommended relationship from here to here.
But I get questions about that when I talk CSDM. It's
some examples will show with the optional line, so that it doesn't, it's optional to the build domain.
Yeah.
And you'll see
two arrows. You have the one for the business app going to the SDLC components, and then you'll have another line that'll go from business application to an application service, and it'll say optional.
Yeah.
So depending on which examples and some of the documentation, you'll see the same 4.0, but some show optional and some just only show going through the path of the build domain.
Yeah, I was going to ask that. There is no plan to retire that relationship, correct? Between the
Not that I
business
know
app
of.
and the app service? Okay.
Because all the use cases up here, like one of the use cases, I want to see the risk of Workday. Well, I need to go down and find out all the underlying technology and suck that up here, right? So there's still going to be all the use cases where these people that are responsible for that app need to be able to look down into the technical domain, like technology portfolio management. And oh my man, like one time we plugged this in down here and we did SAM, and then somebody found Silverlight and that bubbled all the way up to the application. They're like, what do you mean Silverlight? That thing was like a big security hole 15 years ago, right? So that's the kind of stuff that we look to push up here is the software models and the,
Yeah.
yeah. But that's more for a risk assessment, which is part of saying, hey, is there risk on, like that's part of the enterprise architect job, right? Is to say, what is the risk of running this application further? So there's a lot of use cases here where this stuff needs to tie into that stuff. So I don't see us removing that anytime soon.
I would like to add though, if you're implementing application portfolio management and you want to use TPM, the technology portfolio management, it's dependent on the service associations.
Service mapping, yeah.
Yep.
Service mapping and this hook, right? It needs that link here.
Yeah, the model it's a little different, you know. I mean, you got to imagine you don't have DevOps change velocity, so you're not really using the red build area. So the line just goes right from the design to the technical. But if you do have DevOps change velocity and you're doing that as components, then yeah, you go through it to get to technical managed services.
And
That's
usually
all.
You bring up a good point.
Yep.
You're still using user. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Ed. I'll go after you.
Lou brings up a good point, and it's been a disconnect since the beginning of CSDM because I've lived in the build design domain. And so when build finally came in, I thought, oh, we're finally going to connect it. Because what I used to have to do, we would create the business application, then we would take the name and go cut and paste it down in the product in your foundation on your product models. So now when we'll onboard an application, a business application, it automatically creates the model ID, and now it automatically creates the product model. So now I have the connection there. So in our other diagrams, and John, I was glad when you put user stories in here, we're not doing continuous improvement and DevOps and stuff for our customers. We're using user stories, which connect to the product models down below. Yep. And so we have simplified this greatly, mainly because I couldn't get my head space around it. Sorry. And I was like, okay, how should this work? Let's take off our technology hat, take off our ServiceNow hat. How should this flow? And when we finally got it to work, then I came back to this and said, okay, what I'm excited about putting this in ServiceNow, we'll be able to see it. So we're doing the theory right now in the diagram. Then we're going to move it over to the instance so that we can see what it actually looks like, so we can flush out the details.
Yep. Yeah, people, like if you go back up here and you're using, like a lot of people are using ADL, right? So if you're using Azure DevOps up here, you still need a way to track like which stories are you pushing on to that Workday prod, right? So you still need to track that some way, whether it's in ServiceNow or not. So your product might be in Azure today. Are you going to bring it in here? Are you going to copy it over? Are you going to push stories from Azure or Jira up here? Like a lot of times we talk in that domain, we're mostly talking about integrations because there are all those build tools that are already in place, right? So a lot of times that's more of the integration story than it is like we're going to do pure agile in ServiceNow.
And I just want to use the story. I can go end to end with the story, and it's beautiful. Actually, it's the happy path, right? We've all heard you talk about the happy path before. Yep. The happy includes the user story. The headspace can't go around all those other technologies. I would say yet, but it's like, we don't need it. That's just Ed's opinion in life. So don't throw tomatoes at me.
Let's jump in. I want to throw one more kind of dynamic over here before we jump in, and I'll spend a couple minutes on the green. There's an API that you use, right, Albert? You said another system that you use, like one of the modules uses an API to some other system that you don't take care of. Do you remember that one you mentioned to
Yeah,
me?
sure. Yeah. We have a lot of third-party vendors, business process management vendors that our COE uses. And so we do have integrations or APIs that pass data from our HR system of record Workday to others. So example, like we run ADP for payroll, and so we'll pass them PG integrations, PG files over to them. We also have others that we, work with over in benefits.
Who's the benefits vendor you're telling me about?
Yeah, so for us, we use Business Solver, and then they manage our benefits. And so, but then there's others such as we have like a rewards program, that gives employees benefits, discounts, perks, whatnot. So let's say, Disneyland or amusement park. So we have an integration with that vendor so that they know who our employees are. So we give them a demographics file so that, we can hit their system and they recognize, yes, this person is an employee of ServiceNow and they are eligible for ServiceNow discounts, employee discounts. So it could be like car rentals, entertainment. There's just so much out there. But yeah, I mean, that's an example of a vendor that we will integrate with.
Okay. And these have to, I'm not going to go into this today because I want to spend a little bit of time in the green while we have Albert and his team on here. But these are things we have to solve with, right? Are these defined as APIs? And this is a whole conversation in itself. And then how are the treatment here? Like if you come from an incident from here and then it gets, oh, it's Workday. Oh, it's benefits enrollment. Now benefits enrollment has to go to business solvers. So these relationships, right? You can define these as far as you want, right? There's going to be a point that makes sense to do it, right? But does an incident land there? Could it be a business solver problem that we close the ticket here and give it to the business solver team? Or do we leave the ticket open and have the negotiation? Or do they have their own ticket? Like if they're an internal service that's being provided, right? It might be Albert might have a counterpart in another part of the business that takes care of that. So does it get assigned to somebody else?
Yeah, John,
And
John, to that point, right?
And so
There is
what
an
kind of
architectural
object is
diagram.
that?
Sorry.
I apologize.
It could be a tech service. It could be a business service. It could be an API. We had a long conversation on all the different ways that we can document the APIs in here. So there's a lot of options here when you get to this level. In the beginning, I would stick to this level, right? Like if you can just help these guys get from level 1 to the right place in level 2 and see if there's any efficiencies there, that's kind of like your first. But then now here, if you're trying to now help Albert's team to escalate tickets, how do we kind of map that out for people on Albert's teams? So I don't want to go into this because these could be a lot of things.
Yeah, so John, to
Great.
that point, right, there is already a published L2 architectural diagram that goes through all the vendors that we have, all the third-party systems and their interconnections. So maybe you can put a link for this orange to that diagram, which you can reference, or I don't know how much of information you want to fit into the orange box.
Thanks, Srini. Yeah, so that, like I said, we did a deep dive just on this about, I think 3 or 4 meetings ago. And there's actually a really good article from Mark on all the different ways to handle APIs and microservices. But that's kind of like a pretty advanced topic inside of, this is kind of your CSDM 101 in here. This gets more advanced because, the way that you treat the relationships between the vendors and then how you escalate to the vendors, that's all part of that. So let me jump over here just so we cover this one a little bit. So what are
Just before you switch from here, I think we probably need extended session. Just talk about the build domain. We just started a conversation about the build domain, and I know that we're not expecting the elements from that build domain to be in operational CIs, but however, we have a use cases when we do that. Like for example, if you actually put stuff into production from development.
Yeah. And these
Teams
are
may use a
operational.
change rec. Yeah, they may come from here. So maybe like just FYI, if you have like a roadmap, maybe set up additional session for that discussion. Be good.
Yeah, and that's the special thing, right? Because so many companies work in so many different ways in every application. So what we would need to do here is get somebody like Albert's team and talk about like how do you work for your application? Because most organizations I go in, they got 14 different ways they're doing DevOps and waterfall and Agile Scrum Fall. Like no, so we have to pick a specific use case and stick to it, or else we won't get anywhere. So we could talk about use cases, but then everybody's going to have some disagreements, just like we are in the design here. The same thing up there because of just all the different thinking and methodologies that you run into up here. But I like that, having that as a meeting, especially when the digital product CSDM 5 is going to focus a lot more on that build domain.
Yeah.
That's where the product
And,
really
you
comes.
know, agree. But I'm pretty sure that the need, especially for regulated companies, the need to have some change record if you put stuff into production is always there. So that would be a very generic use case, that will be applicable to multiple customers here. So definitely would be good discussion.
Good deal.
Yep. And we
That's the
have all
second.
that, yeah. Like anything we deploy to production, it's all been documented, audited. We have an entire process of how we can move something to production. And then also I just want to call out, we also do partner with our COEs as well so our HR global people, when we are getting requests from them, there are things that we build out for them as well. So it's not just incidents that that my team works on, but we also partner with our stakeholders as well.
Cool. So let's do a little bit down here before we get off. So what are the services, Albert, that you guys, like when people are calling in for tickets or people are calling in and requesting something, like we talked about here, like somebody wants to get a department in ServiceNow wants to use open enrollment. Like what are the types of things that they're either registering for, like the business consumer is using? So whether they're calling in a problem for it or they're saying, hey, my department now needs that thing. Like,
Yeah.
how do you describe that?
So usually most of our requests come from our stakeholders, which is our HR organization. And so let's say if we're looking to expand on one of our offerings, I'll take an easy one that we did. Like we want to expand our one-time payments offering to include now spot bonuses as an easy example, right? So our compensation team will come to us with their requirements of this is what we're looking to do. And then from us, we'll look to design a solution, to see if there's any fit gaps. What are the workarounds are there? And then Srini will be involved in terms of an architect lens of, is what we're building scalable? Can we, because we're growing tremendously. And so we want to make sure our solutions scale to where it's that we don't have to, look to build something again, but that it's just repeatable and we can, it's long-term thinking. And he's also thinking for, what other touch points to any other systems that it may touch so that we're not impacting them. And Srini, feel free to jump in wherever that, but Srini has a big role in our deployments. And then from there,
is that like a request for a new service? Like they're saying in Workday, we want to from the Workday team, we want to request a new service, or is it more like you're supporting one-time payments as the service?
Yeah, I mean, we have existing, services available, but let's say if we want to enhance, one of our offerings, then they'll come to us with like an enhancement request of like, hey, I want to be able to do this in Workday as an example. So then we'll get those requirements, and then afterwards, then we will hand it. This is where like Rob will come into play as an example, and so Rob manages our annual compensation process, and so he's taking all those requirements and he's configuring, developing, building, and then we work with our stakeholders with testing, is what we built what you're envisioning? And so then, we
So
look
that-
to solidify that. Yeah.
And that process is more of an enterprise process, right? It's not a Workday specific process for intaking work, but it's something that like you would do for any ServiceNow application, and just some of it lands in your queue, right?
Yeah, if it falls in our domain, yes.
What are some of the ones you're delivering today? Like on Workday, what are the types of services in the front? Like is benefits enrollment one of them, or is onboarding one of them, or
Yeah, so well, let's see. So onboarding we do with our own platform. So there's so we do that in my service now. So we don't use Workday for onboarding.
Okay.
Benefits enrollment, that's also a separate vendor. But let's take our annual focal process, which is our merit bonus, your year-end performance, so to speak. And so that's something that we'll partner with like our compensation and our talent and performance team as, performance ratings feed into compensation. And so we'll take the requirements of, like, how do we want that experience to be for the people that are doing the planning for their teams, right? Like this person's supposed to get, like, I don't know, 5-10% raise, bonus, stock, and etc. So we'll take those requirements and then we'll, go through testing with our business stakeholders.
got it. What's another one besides rating? Is it rating year-end performance? Would that be a good way to represent it as the service? Is that the service you're providing through the Workday application?
Yeah.
Okay.
Rainy, yeah.
Yeah,
And what's
John, I think, let's connect offline.
Okay.
There's a lot of overlap between, the architectural diagram that we have for L1 and to what you can put here.
Okay.
And it's all about how well we can summarize it and put it in each of these boxes.
Got it. All right, so I think we have enough. Next time, what we'll do is we'll import all this stuff. So we'll go back and import the business applications, actually the services, right? We'll import the green that we talked about today, and we'll go and revisit this builder and change what we had initially. We'll go and take the blue in, so we'll talk about the business capability and the business applications and the tables that you use to bring them in. And like Lou talked about, the platform application would come into play there. Then we'll build the app services, which is kind of the orange piece. We'll build some of that out so that it reflects what's in our diagram. And then we'll actually start using that model. So we'll take a look at how we can use it in an incident, how we can use it in a change. And then lastly, we'll go ahead and show you the scorecards based on the model so that you can start to see how each of these teams are serving each other, right? Because these are all they're serving each other. Like Albert's team is making sure that the business can run year-end performance reviews, right? So we'll start bringing all that in and show the different people who can edit those different domains. And we can't have one person building all this stuff out, right? That's in the end, it's just way too much to maintain. So you need to be able to have these conversations like we had today, document it, and then give people the responsibility to keep it up to date. So I'll end there for today. Thanks everybody that contributed to the conversation. I learned a lot too, so I really appreciate you guys leaning in and helping us push through this model. We'll talk to you in a few weeks. Albert, thanks. And Srini.
Yeah, thanks, Albert
Thank
and
you.
Srini. This
Thank
was
you, guys.
amazing.
Great, thank you.
Bye, everybody.